I'm Gary Anthony Ramsay with your Hour News Now Rewind. Stories making headlines for the week ending April 2nd, 2011. Our top stories include: Barack Obama addresses the nation as he defends U.S. action in Libya. Radiation from Japan shows up in United States rainwater. The Justice Department is investigating the Seattle Police Department for possible civil rights violations. The Supreme Court refuses to hear the death penalty appeal of a Georgia man whose original jury says he's innocent. The Barry Bonds trial continues with testimony from his ex-mistress and trainers. And a popular BET host and DJ is killed near his home in New York. Our top story: Barack Obama takes his case for bombing Libya to the American people in a nationwide address. The president spoke at the National Defense University and emphasized the U.S. role in the Libyan civil war would be limited. He compared the situation in Libya to conflicts in Rwanda and Bosnia, where he said that military action should or was taken to prevent the slaughter of hundreds, if not thousands, of people.
And as president, I refuse to wait for the images of slaughter and mass graves before taking action.
But lawmakers are still criticizing the president for taking action without consulting Congress and for having no clear exit strategy. Complicating matters was a news story this week that said Barack Obama had signed an order that's authorized the arming of Libyan rebels. The White House will only say it's not ruling out that option. With the Japan nuclear crisis and the Libyan civil war taking the center stage of foreign policy, it appears the budget battle has made its way back to the national spotlight, with some signs of possible compromises in the works. As an April 8th deadline approaches, House and Senate leaders are apparently closing in on some common ground to avert a government shutdown. Some Democrats are now endorsing some $33 billion in cuts that were previously a deal breaker, and after years of saying no, some Republicans are now committed to supporting a balanced budget amendment. The current proposed budget stands at $3.7 trillion. The Tea Party, that ushered in many Republicans into power last November, is still pushing for no compromises, while would-be Republican candidates for president are trying to strike a balance between keeping the Tea Party happy and not making too many enemies. The man they want to beat in 2012 apparently still has no trouble raising cash. Barack Obama pulls in $1.5 million at one New York City fundraiser this week. The $38,000 per plate gala was held at Harlem's trendy Red Rooster restaurant. The president spoke briefly and then worked the room to all of his deep-pocketed donors for the evening. It was his first visit back to Harlem since his election campaign 2 years ago. Well, the president was also making news in his hometown of Chicago this week, even though he wasn't there at all. Instead, it was his picture that's being featured in anti-abortion ads that have been plastered all over Chicago's South Side. The group Life Always commissioned the ads, which say, quote, "Every 21 minutes our next possible leader is aborted." The ad is targeting black women who might be considering abortion. It follows another ad in New York City a month ago that said the most dangerous place for African Americans is in the womb. Critics of the ad campaign say they find it ironic this group refers to the president as our leader while working feverishly against all of his policies in public. Well, abortion also made headlines in Arizona this week, as that state has now outlawed the procedure based on the race or the sex of the fetus. The law signed by the governor would target doctors who allegedly performed the procedures. If convicted of the felony, physicians would face up to 7 years in jail and the loss of their medical license. The sponsor of the measure says he wants to prevent a China-like policy of having only one male child per household. Critics of the law say there is no proof that such a trend even exists. In Seattle, the Justice Department is investigating the police department there for possible civil rights violations. This comes in the wake of several beatings and shootings that include the death of a woodcarver last year. John Williams was killed in downtown Seattle after the partially deaf homeless man did not put down a 3-inch carving knife as instructed to. That followed a videotaped arrest of a Latino man in which the handcuffed suspect was stepped on, and while one officer threatened to beat the, quote, Mexican piss out of him. It also followed an incident in which a teenage girl was punched by a cop after being stopped for jaywalking. In Georgia, a man on death row is now again one step closer to death after the Supreme Court refuses to hear his appeal. Troy Davis is accused of killing a Savannah police officer in 1989. Jurors from his first trial came forward to support Davis after witnesses in the original trial said they lied in his identification after police pressure. A federal judge refused to grant Davis a new trial last year.
We were hoping that they would give us some relief because the judge did not even follow directions given by the court. But the court, again, decided that it doesn't want to handle the case and it just wants to pass the buck.
No new date has been set for Davis's execution. The Supreme Court did hear a case involving 6 women who were suing the nation's largest commercial employer, Walmart, for sexual discrimination. The justices are deciding if the case can be made class action, which could potentially involve more than 1 million women. The 6 plaintiffs claim that despite having more experience in the company, they were routinely passed over for promotions and paid less than men with less experience.
Walmart knows the evidence of discrimination is there in documentation. The facts will speak for themselves.
Lawyers for the retail giant say making the case class action would be unfair, as it would lump in more than 1.5 million women into the suit. In your Hour News Now World Wrap, one of Muammar Gaddafi's military leaders defects to the West as civil war continues to rage in the northeast section of the African continent. Libyan Foreign Minister Moussa Koussa flew to Britain this week as opposing forces battle for Gaddafi's hometown and the key oil port. Some say the defection is a sign that Gaddafi's military structure is in disarray. This week, U.S. State Department officials flew to Benghazi to meet with military leaders there. Some other military leaders are also on the move. In the Ivory Coast, the head of that country's army is seeking political asylum from South Africa. Philippe Mangou was head of the military forces under Laurent Gbagbo. Mr. Gbagbo has refused to step down after the United Nations said he lost an election there last year. Forces loyal to Alassane Ouattara, the man whom the UN says is the rightful leader of the country, have been pushing toward the capital city of Abidjan. Thousands of people have been fleeing to the borders to escape the fighting that has claimed hundreds of lives since November. The crisis in Japan has made its way to the U.S. as traces of radiation have shown up in the rainwater of 4 states. As workers in Japan continue to try to keep nuclear reactors cool that were damaged in a devastating tsunami, it appears the runoff water is now contaminating the soil and the ocean water surrounding the Fukushima plant. Authorities have ordered the evacuation zone widened from 12 miles to 25. Low levels of trace radiation have been measured in Massachusetts rainwater this week. Radiation experts believe it's directly linked to the troubled reactor. Health officials say the radioiodine-131 has also shown up in California, Washington State, and Pennsylvania. Those same health officials insist it's not a threat to drinking water. That's your World Wrap. In sports news, the Barry Bonds perjury trial continues with the testimony of his ex-mistress and some former trainers. Kimberly Bell told jurors that during their 9-year relationship, she saw Barry Bonds' behavior and sexual performance change. She relayed accounts of verbal abuse allegedly by baseball's home run king. His former trainer testified that he had to order bigger caps, uniforms, and shoes for Bonds. An enlarged head is a side effect of taking performance-enhancing drugs. Bonds is accused of lying to a grand jury when asked if he knowingly took steroids. In New York, police are investigating the murder of a popular BET host and DJ. He was shot and killed just a few doors down from his own home. DJ Megatron, whose real name is Corey McGriff, was shot in the chest. McGriff was the host of BET's 106 in Park segment called What's Good. He also DJ'd for New York's Hot 97. While no motive has been identified publicly by investigators, recent posts on YouTube suggest that McGriff borrowed a large sum of money from someone and didn't pay it back. Sources say there is yet to be a suspect or even a witness interviewed in this case. Corey McGriff was 32. And finally, an activist and a journalist who was responsible for starting the Los Angeles Tribune has passed away. Almina Lomax was born in Galveston, Texas in 1915. She started the LA Tribune in 1941 amid allegations of police corruption and abuse. In the 1960s, during the Civil Rights Movement, she moved her family to the Deep South to be on the front lines. Eventually, she moved back to California and worked for the San Francisco Chronicle and the Examiner. She's survived by her son Michael Lomax, who's president of the United Negro College Fund. Almina Lomax was 95. For a complete check of any of the stories you've seen on The Rewind, remember, as always, go to the bottom of the web page, find the link of the story you'd like to see, and click your way through. That's your Hour News Now Rewind for this week. I'm Gary Anthony Ramsay.